Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our market overview here. Uh, just an overview of the market here, and just to see what we can expect out of our major ETFs and all their indices and sectors. Everything you see in this video is not financial advice. It's just a market overview. Let's kind of get a gauge of what's going on in the market. All right. So first and foremost, as everyone may already realize, first thing I look at is our weekly candle. Um, not too much coming out of the weekly candle in as far as structure wise, but we do see that we're closing above this previous weekly range that we've had in the past, with another green candle continuing the trend towards the upside. There is slight, you could say, a slight rejection towards the top near our all-time highs, but that's to be expected, especially with the end of the week. We're reaching all-time highs towards the end of the week. Of course, you're going to expect a little bit of a pullback, just to indicate that people are closing their positions. It's never certain that a stock will continue going forward endlessly, but it's also not certain if a stock will go down right after hitting all-time highs, right? So usually the safety point is just closing right above all-time highs, and just playing it safe, especially towards the end of the week. So that's why you see a little bit of rejection here, but we are still closed above quite a bit of a range here. Ooh. Let's see. Let's go to our daily chart here. Bring up my thousands of lines here. Anything on the weekly I wanted to mention besides that? Oh yes, one more thing on the weekly here. So on the weekly, with us having this uptrend that we're still holding, we could expect somewhat of a pullback on the weekly chart without actually breaking any major bullish trends that we're having. So even if we created a lower high towards the top end of this range here, on our candle here, let's say we close the high around 600, 603, that's still a very safe spot to have a lower high, for us to even have continued pressure upwards. So don't be too worrisome if we do have any sort of a pullback. Towards the end of the week, the beginning of the week, we really still have an opportunity here to create like a lower high in our weekly structure here. As you see, we've had new highs, a lower high, new highs, lower highs, and so on and so forth. So don't be too quick to go bearish or bullish on SPY if we do have like a little bit of a pullback. So our daily chart, again, slight resistance here. This is just our all-time highs, to be expected. Pull up my chart here. We finally broke out of this long channel that we've been watching for quite some time in our previous lives here. As always, our expected weekly ranges are here in purple. 616.52 is the high, and the low is somewhere around 599.42, I believe it is. Again, all these levels and resistances will be provided to you at the end of the live. Towards the end of the night, I'll shoot a message to everyone giving out the levels that I have here. Let's see. Technical difficulties. I do not have my drawing tool up. Give me 1 second. Okay. So let's see if it works here. All right, there we go. It is working. Okay. So we finally broke out of our channel that we were identifying here for some time, with many supports along the way down here. So we're finally breaking out of the channel. So this pullback that we were having, we were identifying whether it was a pullback or a full change in trend. Because if you see on the weekly chart that we showed before, there was a straight uptrend on SPY on the weekly. Right now, we were trying to see if this pullback channel can hold, and it has been holding for some time. We finally closed above it, indicating that we are leaning more bullish than bearish for the time being. But like I said, any pullbacks are that can be expected could come towards this area. On the weekly chart, I was showing around 500, 600 level. This kind of corresponds with our lower expected range. The way I get these ranges, I basically use an option straddle technique, and, and kind of get the ranges for that. Mr. M here, I can't see your name because I'm on streamer mode. Could you please mute your mic? Let me go ahead and mute him. Sorry, guys. All right, so yes, so any major pullbacks that we have here could test the upper end of this channel to validate that we are confirming over this down channel that we were in before. Even if we do look below, we still have a possible high that can be created right off of this low here, our low expected range. It corresponds with quite a few touches of resistance in the past as well. So if we do have a pullback to fill some of these gaps along the way, it can be expected that we could possibly have more of a support here. So don't look too much for if we do have a pullback. Don't expect us to just like flush down the drain, right? Last week, we pretty much had our pathing for either we could see resistances towards the high here for something like this and a stronger pullback, before testing our strong pivotal zone and trying to find a balancing consolidation before uptrend. Um, Obviously, that did not happen. We had just that was one of our other possibilities of just gapping up and going, right. So we gapped up, we went, we gapping up, gapping up. It's just a straight trend upwards. So as far as technicals goes, there's only so much that you can do in regards to a gap. All you can really do is look to see if we fill this gap and what occurs here. So whether when we fill these gaps doesn't necessarily mean that we'll go back up, but it also doesn't mean that we'll go down. So it's really important to take a look at our supports and resistances to see how far they are and see if we can find volume within this range, indicating what direction price decides to move, which we can only do during during market price action. As far as pathing goes for SPY, there's a few outcomes. Like I said, when as far as our gap fills, let's do yellow. As far as gap fills goes, we can easily have a fill of the gap, which would test our range here before consolidation and then a breakout happening towards, I would say, more in the end of the week, looking out for a FOMC week to see if it will have us with any dovish or hawkish expectations. Obviously, if it is dovish, we expect things to go up, and if it's hawkish, we expect things to go down. So towards this area of bounce and consolidation zone, we do have, I would say, around Wednesday, really we'll see whether price wants to continue in the upwards direction or downwards direction, because any price action up until Wednesday could completely be invalidated, as you've seen on days like here, where it's the FOMC, the Feds give one hawkish news and the market just takes a whole huge dump, right? And the other way around, if we had any for our elections, we just had a huge gap up and just continuation on the other side. So this week is full with earnings and major news. So if you see green, I don't usually say these words all the time. If you see green, take green. It's just a way to say that it went up, you didn't get out, and it's on you. But reality, if you see green and price looks like it's holding, then doesn't mean that you should just get out, right? You also want to understand what's happening with price, right? Especially with like how I drew this channel here, right? We can indicate that SPY is on a huge uptrend. It occurred um, a little bit of a pullback here before continuing upwards, right? So yes, you're seeing SPY fall down and you get worrisome and you're like, oh man, my money is not looking good right now. And then by the time you get out, bang, price goes up. So that's why it's really important to understand what's happening in the market, whether it's just a pullback, a lower high in the structure, and so on and so forth. But weeks like these where there's high volatility, major news coming out, see green, take green is a great mentality to have, because it's really price is really unexpected this week. So it's just something I wanted to mention. Excuse me. And another bullish outcome I would see is we've had this push up and then slight pullback here. So we're creating this little box zone here. What I would like to see is more of a consolidation in this range leading up to our FOMC, or at least Monday's range, more of a consolidation, validating this range. Even if we pull back just a little bit to 605 area and just consolidate in this range, build value here, because over here there's not necessarily any value here. Um, Buyers are stepping up, sellers are stepping up, and there's not much balance here in this range here. We're over our previous all-time highs, and people are, as it's running up, people are selling out on a new high, selling out a new high, selling out on a new high. So to really say that we can consolidate in the zone to create a value, which would create a huge volume bar in our volume profile, creating value here, which is a solid support. Um, so consolidation here would be really important for us to retest these highs at the 609, I would say. Retest those highs. So consolidation, retest those highs, maybe a slight pullback before attempting to break a resistance and creating new highs. For our bearish outcome, I'm not too keen on us having a massive flush. Um, with FOMC on Wednesday, it's very likely that we'll attempt to fill gaps, and then Wednesday comes. Let's say this is Wednesday, and then we have that flush. That's likely, but what what's more possible is on any pullbacks, look to see how price reacts on the gap fill. As I mentioned before on our bullish outcomes as well, you're looking to see if we'll have some momentum upwards or we're just going to continue down, fill the next gap, bounce, fill the next gap, bounce. So as far as downwards pressure, I would not really look to buy and hold. I would essentially look to either see green, take green. When you start seeing resistances, like if we start flushing here, here's a solid support, this is a good exit. Even if we go lower, even if price goes lower, you still exited at a good point. You took green, you walked away from the market because it could easily have bounced upwards. So as far as bearish outcomes, I'm not too keen on buying and holding. I would just really look to sell on supports, and really look to see what happens on Wednesday. And then QQQ, we'll go through QQQ real quickly. It's not too much I wanted to point out on QQQ. One thing we can see here is we identified before that we were obviously in an uptrend, and we drew our fibs out here. Last week I mentioned that on our uptrend here, it seems that we're having a slight pullback correction to validate the center of the middle of our range here, and we had a little slight look below at the 50%, but we ended up closing above it. on our last live that we spoke about, and now we're actually breaking out of the channel that is happening. So our channel upwards and our slight pullback channel both have been broken. Um, it's inherently very bullish. I am not bearish on QQQ whatsoever, especially since we are holding over the 38 here, even after having a nice pushback, and our pullback is only just at the 38 level, which is areas of previous support, slight resistance, but it's in a nice range, right? This is our upper range here. Let's say this is the upper range here, and we have our lower range right here. We're well within the upper range of this small value. Well, in our weekly, it's multiple weeks, but we're above the middle of our value range. So it's inherently very bullish. And as far as pathing goes, similar to SPY here, what's slightly different about QQQ, which if you look at the market right now, at least with futures, you'll see that QQQ, we had our massive push up and then pull back towards the lows of the initial gap up, right? In this range here. And then, on close, we had the push right up towards the close. On SPY, we didn't have this much of a pullback to validate the range that we previously gapped up in. On futures, you'll see that there's a massive pullback happening right now. But what's not too worrisome for me is it's similar things are happening here where we're coming back to test the low of our structure that's happened on Wednesday. This is our Wednesday candle here, our Thursday, Friday candle. We had a pullback, validated this range before breaking upwards. Essentially, SPY is doing this right now, right? It's validating this similar way as this. And as far as pathing goes with QQQ, like I said, the same thing here. Just look to see how price fills these gaps, our gaps along the way, if we do end up filling gaps, right? This is also a value gap here. There was not too much price action in this range here. So look to see how we fill these gaps, because it can either fill the gap, go up, fill the gap, resist, continue to go down, bounce again as well, right? And just continue upwards. Even if we looked at a bearish outcome, we can bounce here, we can bounce here. It literally can bounce anywhere here. I would want to see us have a major break in structure, right? We have a major trend still holding here on our daily chart. So to really say that any of these breakdowns are not just lower highs in our structure, would be, not the smartest idea. If I look at the weekly here, or hourly here, you'll see the gaps a little bit more clearly. See the gaps a little bit more clearly here. So even if we have any push downwards, there's low volume and low price action in this range. We can easily, what we did here, have some consolidation before a breakup. If we go lower, here's some more consolidation. Every single gap up has had some type of consolidation range, right? One here, one here. So even if there's any pullback towards these gaps, we can safely assume that price will have some type of support or consolidation around this range, and it's truly depend on this heavy news that we have this week to determine if we're going to continue downwards or we're going to just continue upwards. So as far as overall trend, I definitely still see a bull trend holding up very strongly on QQQ. Just be wary of any shorts on any gaps A gap can easily go the other either direction. So, and it does not necessarily have to fill. We can stop right here and break upwards. So I would really just play the news, follow price action. You get in, see our resistances, our resistances and our supports. Look for any breaks underneath. Exit at the next support. With all this implied volatility and massive news, I would not be so keen on just holding and continuously holding for any other for longer than a day on especially the indices, right? IWM. Let's see, what do I see on IWM? Our weekly candle. Start off there. Oh, did I? Okay, I closed Discord for some reason. Okay. Our weekly candle. It is not the prettiest compared to the rest of us. On rest of them on QQQ and SPY here. It seems to have a little bit of rejection towards this upper end of this range that we had here. Slight rejection, slight rejection. We're near that area here, so we're trying to validate some price action in this range which we did not have any. We're trying to validate some price action in this range. So it's expected that slight pullback can occur and look for some supports around this area here. Let's pull up our drawings again here. If you noticed on our retracement from the initial gap push down on the beginning of December, towards the beginning of December to the end of the middle of December, we are at the 50% mark. So we had a slight rejection at the 50% mark here on our weekly range. We were looking at this on the daily time frame. So now to see it on the weekly range kind of end up in the same spot is quite interesting, and as well as our daily 50 SMA here is where price essentially had a slight rejection here. We watched last week that our 5 SMA is starting to gain some traction here, and our 20 SMA is having a little bit of some smoothing here, some smoothing it out happening here. In our pathing last week, we were looking towards any uptrends following SPY and QQQ to seeing if IWM will either reclaim or find resistance at our 50 SMA, and that's essentially where we're at now. I'm not, as far as pathing goes, there's not too much to say on IWM. One thing I will say is the same thing I said last week. We're looking to see if we're hold over 227. That's essentially your huge line in the sand, and I will be watching this very closely at 227, right? Chicken scratch handwriting there, but 227 is your key line in the sand. Holding over this is just going to be good for SPY. So I will be using IWM very closely to watch to see how SPY. I will be watching it very closely to see how SPY reacts. So if we see any flushes under 227, that's when I would lean a little bit more bearish on SPY, or at least consider entering a short position on SPY. So that's essentially the only thing I'm really looking at with IWM. I just want to see some rejections at 227, or if we can reclaim 230, and have our 50 SMA act as support here for us to make attempts to fill the gap at 100%. And then let's just roughly go through our market internals. Again, all the levels will be marked at the end here. I will send them out, and as well as a little overview of the volume profile we'll go over towards the end of the live here. One thing we noticed here on our, let's go to the, daily chart is better. All right, it's not a beautiful lineup, but one thing we were watching on the high yield corporate bonds for quite some time now is we initially watched us break underneath the buying channel that we had, and this week we've re-entered this buying channel, and it's now holding. So we had a slight look below, but we did support off of the weekly pullback channel that we had here. What's significant about the high yield bonds, as I've mentioned before, is this is essentially the market's risk appetite. So if the HYG is doing well, people feel more comfortable putting their money in more riskier assets. Riskier assets are pretty much everything in QQQ. That's our Nvidia, um, you know, um, AMD, Apple, stuff like that, right? Major tech industries. And as you see, we're testing the top end of this channel here that we identified quite some time ago. You see the little circle here. I'm sure a few weeks, I believe this is last week or the week before, we identified that it had multiple touches of our pullback channel here, and now we're looking to break out. So I would like to see if we do have a clean breakout over here. Um, to see some more strength and confidence in the market. See if buyers in the market are feeling comfortable, or investors are feeling more comfortable putting money into major indices, like major growth indices such as tech, right? Because tech is essentially running the market, especially with our president's huge I guess you could say liking to AI. We can see some nice movements here, but we really do need to see if the risk appetite for the market is continuing to hold up, right? SMH here. Nothing too much to say. I wanted to point out that we're in holding a buying channel here, but the major thing is we finally broke out of this wedge, and once again we're still continuing to hold over 250, which is really good for our semiconductors. I would like to see if we are holding over 260 here. If you do play any semiconductors, Nvidia and AMD, Texas Instruments, I believe it is. If you play any of those, I definitely want to see higher lows playing out on SMH. A supportive bounce here around previous resistance here, validating this area of range for a push upwards again after the break out of the buying channel, creating a slight pullback channel here. Make it a little prettier. Slight pullback channel here taking place. So I would like to see if we can break out of this channel, find some slow controlled selling before a breakout upwards. This is very good for our semiconductors. Once again, do want to see for 260 hold if you want to see any newer highs or retest of highs on any major semiconductors. Let's go through our sectors really quickly. The XLF sector, we will see a bit of price action this week on it, with our news at the end of the live. I'll also post in general, adding everyone, kind of breaking down what our news for the week is and how it's going to be affecting the markets and our sectors. We finally broke out of this buying channel that we have here, and once again, you'll notice that every time there is a break of a buying channel, I'll try to point out as well. Anytime I have my announcements, anytime we have a break out of a buying channel, we do see a slight pullback. This is of course the daily. If I go on to a smaller time frame, the candles are too rigid, I guess you could say, or not as clean to really make structure out of. But we do see a little bit of a pullback here and a breakout upwards, supporting at the 5 EMA. So I want to just see the 50-48 level here being acted as a support, and see if we can break this resistance here for any push up or upwards, right? This is going to be important, especially with our FOMC meeting and conference happening on Wednesday. We want to see some confidence in in our markets. So one thing with the XLF is if we do have a chance of increase in our rates or rate hikes, you're gonna see this skyrocket to the roof, right? And then SPY will have a little bit of a bounce, but it will soon get pulled back because essentially what's happening is the sector is inflating the hype of SPY and confidence in SPY because a lot of money is going to these banks, but soon after you start realizing that because interest rates are going higher, everything costs more, and there's no signs of what you can say the inflation that's happening, right? But we'll discuss more as each meeting happens. I'll try to discuss what's happening after the week after Wednesday. I'll try to go through the conference that happened and kind of go through everything with you guys. Let's go XLK. Nothing much on XLK. XL XLE is having a pullback. We'll see some news this week. One thing I'm trying to remember. Oh, XLV. I am impressed by our channel here that has been holding for, I would say, the beginning of November. We've been holding this channel for quite some time on our XLV, which is our healthcare sector. What happens during market uncertainty, especially with our high yield bond, if this starts to dip down, that's our risk on, right? People are more confident in growth stocks. When people start to lose confidence in growth stocks, they go towards defensive stocks. And during a market of uncertainty, stocks like XLV will start to have some momentum upwards, just as well as XLP, which is at the moment testing the 50% retracement, and off of our weekly pullback here, right here, our weekly downtrend. The reason I am bringing this up is because we do want to. One thing that we noticed with IWM as opposed to SPY is IWM is lagging behind SPY as far as it's pushing. You want to see it follow a little bit with SPY. Right, SPY is just having a huge, massive push up, and IWM is kind of lagging here. What that shows is that market is having, yes, it's having a push upwards. There's anticipations with new presidents, our lives, all this hype over our earnings, whatever the case may be. But really what's happening is the confidence in the market as far as risky assets are still not confidently there yet, especially if we're not breaking out of our HYG channel here. And with our healthcare sector here having a breakout of its channel, XLP having some massive run-ups here, it just shows that people are more comfortable putting their money in safer assets and defensive assets for the time being. So it's just something worth noting, especially if you want to see some all-time highs on all your favorite tech stocks and so on and so forth. I think that's it here. I was gonna go over an Nvidia and Tesla here, but nothing really much happening, especially with the news. Our earnings this week, Nvidia's in a range. I'm just not touching it. It's in a range. If you must touch it, over 141 is bullish. I would say you don't want to lose 140, 150. Tesla here. We were looking to see if we can close over 415 here. We had somewhat of a rejection here. The problem is our rejection with Tesla. Typically, when we have some rejections on Tesla, we are looking for, let's say if this line is price action, you want to see some steep drops in price action, right? Tesla moves quite large as far as range goes, and especially if buyers did not have confidence. Who am I missing here? Oh, there you go. Sorry about that. And if buyers are not finding confidence over 415, you would safely assume that there was going to be much more deeper of a pullback here, which we did not have. That does not necessarily mean that we're going to have this huge breakout here. I would just look to see if we can close over 415. But with our earnings this week, um, price action, even if we have some type of bounce here and you know buy a 450 call and you think it's going to go to the roof, um, with the cost of entry being so high, by the time that the implied volatility settles down, you you would have to expect a huge move. Like if you're at 450, you would have to expect Tesla to push up to the 470s, 475 range for your contract to really even have value, because after the implied volatility starts to settle right after earnings, you're not going to really get too much out of it. So as far as Tesla, I just one thing I just wanted to point out was that we had our slight rejection at 415, but we did not see some aggressive selling taking place here. So I'm curious to see if this week we'll have some aggressive buying, and then see how earnings reacts to that. And then Apple is just not looking good. It's not happy right now. So I'm curious to see if we'll have some positive earnings to have us back up into this range that we're on the upper end of our range here. All right, and there goes that. I will post the news, like I said, in the general chat and all of our levels. One thing I'm going to go over really quickly is our volume profile. Many people ask me about it. I'm going to go through Intel, just because I was looking for a good example on what to use, and Intel just kind of sparked my interest. So how the volume profile works, essentially, is there are multiple nodes in our volume profile. Here's one. Here's a high volume node. These are valleys. Let's do it in better colors. It's still green, right? So these are our peaks, and these are our valleys. And valleys are essentially areas of low volume. Common misconception is the peak here means that buyers are here, right? Yes, buyers are here, right? But it also means that we have sellers here as well. This profile here is essentially just measuring the amount of volume that occurred at this price range, right? So the middle of our price range. It's just gonna show the price range for what I'm looking at. So just a heads up. So our middle line here is our POC. So this is just the center of our price range. Essentially what the POC is. The POC essentially is buyers accepted price here and sellers accepted price here. So that's how POC works, right? So buyers and sellers met in the middle, and this is where we're at. That's POC. They met in the middle, and that's basically how you identify the POC. So as far as our volume nodes here, common misconception that I've noticed that a lot of people are using is they assume that if we're in this volume range, that it's gonna have a final huge breakout, or if we break underneath, it's gonna have a huge dump. Although those things are possible, essentially we're just looking at areas where there's lots of volume. So instead of looking at it as, hey, when price breaks here, I'm gonna go long, or when price breaks here, I'm gonna go short, look at it more of an entry for how you want to play price action, right? So let's say we're at this level on Intel, right? If we can start breaking over here, there's lower volume here. Essentially meaning that from this point to here, buyers feel confident with price going up. But also, sellers feel confident with price falling down to this level. What that means is if we do have somewhat of a break here, you could safely assume that we will try to test the top end of our volume, our other volume note here. This is where the buy and hold takes place, right? But here is another thing that people might mistaken is when we break above here, that this is it doesn't always have to go up. It's just a very likely zone. So this is our POC, which is our magnet. So yes, price is gonna have strong gravitation towards that, but what could happen is we can have a consolidation taking place. This is where you noticed I will mention that consolidation is highly important because if we start to consolidate above this level, now we'll have this volume bar come out all the way here because there's a lot of volume in this range. Price is being accepted in this range. Essentially is how it works. I'm trying to avoid saying how to trade it, and more just how to identify things. If I go to a weekly chart here and zoom out just a little bit, I think it was around here, July or August. Let's go out a little bit more. Okay, so if I drew a line, I wanted to settle there. Sorry. All right. If I drew, come on, give me one bar. All right, we can just do that. Multiple bars is fine. All right, one bar. If I drew a line here, let's make it red. Right here, let's make that green, and let's draw a line here and make that yellow. So I think I'm not sure if he's here, but you'll notice Gray will post a lot about pivotal points, and I can't elaborate how he does his pivotal points, but I'll elaborate how pivotal points work. So I drew a line at the top and the bottom of this volume range. Let's close this out and go in this area here on the 1 hour chart. Let's see. Or 4 hour, I guess we can do. This is essentially how the volume nodes work, right? So we had a huge candle here, right? This was our candle. Our large volume note, sorry, not candle, a large volume note was here. So the upper end of that note, you could consider it a resistance. Price is not being accepted above it, as well as the bottom of it being another resistance, right? Because supports are also resistance, right? They're rejections of a price level, right? So price was rejecting at 218. It rejected at 218, and it also rejected at 222. Is where our volume node is, right? People were comfortable with price remaining in this range. This is where they wanted to buy. This is where sellers agreed price should be and buyers agreed that price should be. And that's where the middle of our volume node takes place. This is our pivotal point. Essentially, how pivots work is price moves freely in between this range. You notice when we had I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but if we had when we have a rejection near the pivotal point, we headed towards support, tested the pivot, and then eventually when we broke above the pivot, it went up above. So our pivotal point is more of a magnet. Price will go above, below it, above, below it. You'll see how it went below and above multiple times. That's how pivots work. So when you're looking at a volume range, you don't necessarily want to draw the line in the middle for your, I guess, support or your resistances, because this did not, this yellow line did not act as support or resistance. It essentially acted as a magnet for price. Price broke under, came back, broke under, came back, broke above, came back, broke above again, came back, broke under, came back. So you cannot use the center of a volume note for indicators of a support and resistance. This is essentially what the top of the volume notes are. Um, I guess, yeah. I can go more in depth on how I would use it, but it really depends on what chart you're looking at and what you're trying to, obtain on the trade, whether it's a long or a short trade. I just wanted to go over some basics on how the volume nodes work, just to kind of get an example of where you would draw those lines. Don't want to go in too much depth and take up too much time, but you'll see here there is low volume here, lower volume taking place here. And the moment we broke above this large volume note that we identified on the weekly, price had huge momentums upwards. It was another bar here that was, there was another bar here, I believe, on the weekly, somewhere around here, another large volume note, because we identified that there was a gap here and there was a huge volume note on the weekly just a few moments ago. And you notice how when price broke underneath that support that we had here, it had an easy time going between the valleys that we identified, right? There's lower volume here. Price moves quickly in low volume because price wants to settle at an area of value. But what we can always create areas of value once again. So we break above here, we broke above here, consolidated here, and now we've created another area of value in the chart. This is essentially how the volume bars work. Try to keep it as simple as possible. It's not really your buy and exit positions. It's essentially just understanding what it tracks. So to use an indicator, you're not really using indicators to, for your trade. You're using indicators to help you assist with how you're going about your trades. So I would avoid using an indicator as an entry for a trade or an exit for a trade, unless that's specifically how your strategy is. Everyone has a different strategy, and I just wanted to kind of go over how I use the volume profile here to look for areas of significance, right? So this area in the chart is an area of significance. I would think it would be highly unlikely price would, if it fell, would go cleanly between below this area in our volume profile. It would have some support around here. But yeah, that concludes our live. I'll try to go in more depth, or maybe make another video going through several other charts for us in the future. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, you guys have a great night. I'll stick around for a little bit if anybody has any questions. Might take a few trades here as well, so feel free to stick around.